One of the weirdest things being a not native English speaker is the fact that you have to pick your accent actually. Of course, you can try to have your actual accent, which is the accent of the country of which you are from. But that usually is not a good idea because it means that people are first of all very easily not easily identifiable. Of course, there is no big disadvantage maybe to being recognized as the statesman you are, statesman. But due to the fact that most of English is spoken in either America or Britain or Australia and so on, these are the dominant accents, and these are the accents everybody is used to. If we now have to adapt our listening to multiple different accents from all these languages that also try to speak English, or people with the native languages that speak English, like Indian English, like Chinese English, like German English, like French English. And if we have to adapt to all of these different sounding dialects, not really dialects, but of course they to a certain extent actually could be considered dialects, because sometimes in a country, for example, there are commonalities among all of these speakers that speak the foreign language that also might represent themselves in how they speak. So there might be certain patterns. Because, for example, if you try to translate something from your normal language from your normal native language to the language in which you are then trying to speak, then this often could result in phrases that are basically only possible if your native language is the same as the other people that share this native language. So now the question of picking your accent is the one where you now try to basically standardize your English to the English that is the most common. Of course, in the future, this might be Chinese English, this might be Indian English, just due to population size. But as of now, I think it just makes sense to either try to have basically either a globalized accent, if that makes sense. But of course, there is not really something like a globalized English accent, because, well, you have to pronounce the words in a way, and either I pronounce them as British, or I pronounce them as American, or I try to do a South African accent, or I try to do an Australian accent. But of course, depending on which accent you choose, you also have your own association with the country of this accent. For example, if I think of Britain and I also think of people who speak British, then I think of people who are stereotypically Briton, I would say. Of course, this comes with its downsides and it comes with stereotyping, but of course, you cannot really avoid these things in your own mind. So, therefore, I think it makes sense to try to choose your accent. And because also what this creates is a default accent. It makes it far easier to speak English because you don't have to think about either British or American English all the time and how you write it down. Is it color with an O or color with an OU? Is it colorful? Of course, also with the same letters. So now, or the same is true for theater, for example. Do you write it as RE or ER? What I noticed with myself is that whenever I record something that tends to be more on the abstract side, then I tend to speak more in a British accent. I don't really try to speak in a British accent, actually. It just happens at this point in time. But I can also try to switch more to an American accent. And what I notice when I switch to an American accent, first of all, that it sounds more like then the German accent comes more through. At the same time, my voice is a little bit different because I kind of have these characteristics for these characters I created for myself. The British accent, for example, has a slightly higher voice, and the American accent, on the other side, might be a little bit deeper and, well, just more, also not as sophisticated and more colloquial, if that makes sense. So, in the end, choosing how you portray yourself means that you also associate the different aspects that are usually associated with speakers of this nation. And of course, if you then are not fulfilling these standards, this might also backfire. For example, if you try to be this very abstract thinking, very well put together, at least in terms of words, British dude, then this might backfire because people might see you as an imposter, which you actually are, because you are not this British dude, because you are not British. But of course, it now influences how you are perceived over time, but it also influences how you see yourself over time due to the feedback loop. But it also influences what content you actually make. For example, if you record yourself doing videos, for example, or also if you speak like this in a job interview, and so on and so forth. A correction. Most English probably is not spoken anymore in English-speaking countries because there is just so much English spoken worldwide nowadays by potentially more foreign speakers than native speakers.